Okay, in this lesson we're going to be focusing more on the mechanics of the left hand. We will need our right hand though to play, so that's why we did the right hand first. So now we know how to activate the string. We can play the open strings, and now we'll be talking about how we can use our left hand to fret the notes and make the notes or the strings a little shorter distances. For every fret, the pitch goes up a half step in music. If you don't know what that means, it's the shortest distance between two notes is a half step. And so, open to first fret on a string would be as close as two notes could be. The same with like first to second fret. If we had a distance, let's say, of open to second fret, that would be called a whole step, which makes sense because it's two half steps put together. And then there would be other distances, and they all have little names, different what's called intervals. And we'll look at those at a further lesson. But just to know, the distance between notes in that era of like musical space is something that you could get and learn very easily with these exercises. It's just hearing the notes go up and down in pitch. And another thing that you can gain early on from this experience is you'll notice the open strings typically can have a different color or timbre than the fretted strings. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of a property of the guitar. I like to play in a way that minimizes the difference between open strings and fretted strings, and I typically do that just by playing a little brighter or a little closer to the bridge, especially when I have combinations of open strings and fretted strings that are very close or fast. You'll see me typically play more towards the bridge with a brighter sound to kind of help even out those. It works for me. Other people may have different thoughts, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. So the first left hand exercise that we're going to do actually doesn't involve the right hand at all. And typically what we're going to talk about is, number one, is the kind of setup of our left hand. And to do that, I have a little prop. So here is a can, and I have my fingers wrapped around it. And you notice if I take a drink of it, I didn't drop it. It's because our fingers have a way of holding things that's very good, and that's with the thumb opposite of the middle finger. It makes it a very kind of balanced position for that. Now, if I have that position and all I do is kind of make a line for my fingers to set on and bend them until they're kind of in that position. You see there? Got like this kind of line. And then also I'm going to flatten out my thumb. So what I have here is this kind of like flattened C. Got like a C with a thumb position that's kind of flattened. So that's typically what we want to look for. Now, most people can find this position, and you should practice this just a little bit. Thinking about holding that can of Coke, line the fingers up on another finger on your right hand like that, and then the thumb flattening out. What that does is it creates an opportunity for our hand to be on the back of the, on the neck like this. Look at the thumb, how it's still opposite the second finger on the back of the neck. And it is certainly not over the neck like this. The people that play guitar like this are shortening the length of their fingers. It can be an advantageous position for playing certain styles of rock and roll and blues on an electric guitar where the neck is not as big, because it makes a good anchor for like a vibrato or a bent note. But we don't really do any of that on the classical guitar. And half of my technique on electric guitar don't do that either. So you'll want to look for that flat C. And what we're going to do is we're going to place with that flat C our 4 fingers on 5 or 4 or different respective frets. So the first finger will be on the 5th fret, and I mean right above the fret. So there's the open 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th metal bar there. So notice my finger is like right over it. And then I'm also going to put my 2nd finger over the 6th, my 3rd finger over the 7th, and my pinky over there. And you'll see I have this position to where I'm not pushing the strings down yet. I've just got the spacing, just lightly hovering over the string with my fingertips. Now what I want to do is I want to lift all the fingers off the string and make them come back to the string, and make sure that the tips have not like migrated off away from the fret. What you'll tend to see is like your pinky will move away, or your first finger might come closer to your second finger. But if you can keep the spacing between the fingers even as you lift up and down the string, that's the best exercise to start to develop the left hand. Most people have the strength to push the string down to the fret, but where people tend to lack the flexibility and strength in their hand is this element of the spacing in between the fingers. And if we can work that right now, especially 10-15 minutes every time you pick up the guitar, you'll find yourself just blossoming very quickly into a really good left hand technique. So you pick them up and down maybe 10 or 15 times, and every time you pick them up and down, you're making sure that the fingers are right over the frets. And then you're going to go down and do the same thing on the A string. Do that a little bit, picking up, putting down, make sure they hit at the same time. The fingers like to get away from you, make sure they get spaced appropriately. Then go to the D string. Also notice as I move to every new string, the thumb is moving with the whole position of the hand. Like here's the G string, and then the B string. Then I barely have any left to grab for the E string, right? My thumb is just like on the edge of the guitar, just barely there. Maybe if your hands are a little smaller than mine, maybe you don't even need to put the back of the thumb to play the high E string. But I like to have something there, it helps it a little bit. And as I move back, you'll see the thumb kind of move with the position. And the reason I like the thumb to stay opposite of the second finger as I move down and get lower and lower is it makes every string feel like the same string. So the mechanics can be recycled for every string. The angle and the curvature of all my fingers essentially gets to stay the same. And especially for all these exercises that we're about to do, this can be very helpful. Now, once you can master the 5th fret like that and get the spacing right, try to scoop down a fret to the 4th fret. So now our fingers are over the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th fret. And you can do the same kind of exercise. Take your time really trying to make sure the finger spacing is really correct. It can be very difficult. And then onto the 3rd fret, 2nd fret, and finally the 1st fret. It gets harder and harder the lower you go because the frets get further and further apart, which means you have to space the fingers a little further apart and maintain that spacing. But eventually this setup will just kind of stick in your technique, and you'll be able to feel, when I'm on the 1st fret and I want to 1 finger per fret, it feels like this. 2nd fret a little easier. And don't forget to work down the guitar too, because the fingers can get closer together to a point to where you have to almost work on pushing the fingers together to get the space small enough to cover a few frets, especially when you're like way up here on the highest notes of the guitar. You really have to worry about keeping the fingers closer together, and the thumb will eventually have to just come behind the 1st finger when you play above the fretboard right here, because there's no cutaway on most classical guitars. So that's one thing you want to work on too with this exercise, is feeling those fingers, keeping that spacing on those higher frets. It's a good investment. So once you've done that, you have a good foundation of left hand position. You've found the fingertips and you've got them spaced on the single strings for 1 finger per fret very evenly. The next exercise we want to do is something called a finger crawl. Now we could do this over where I've got it written in the 1st fret essentially. Or you could take it to another fret. It doesn't matter, but you'll see what I mean once we get the pattern down. Okay, so the first thing that we really want to look at here on this finger crawl is really more of an idea of two things. Number one, security. We want, when we press down the note and play it, we want to really feel the finger touch the string to the metal fret. Now notice the first string on this example is open. So what we want to do is get the first finger as close as we can to the first fret before we play it, and then go up. Now as far as the right hand fingers on this exercise, it doesn't really matter, but I would recommend that when you play a bass string, the low 3, the thumb plays it, and when you play a treble string, maybe you're alternating the index and the middle finger. So that's something to work towards too. Let's put the metronome on, and I'm going to show you this first exercise. Be sure and keep the finger right above the first fret so it's ready to play. And I'll go back and I'll show you some things you might improve. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so the big assignments here is getting the left hand first finger to securely push the first fret, the string down to the first fret and not buzz. If you don't press hard enough, sometimes you'll make it sound like this. Kind of muted sound, kind of rattly. Once you push down all the way, another thing that could happen is you could have it pushed down securely, but just play the string too loud, and it could buzz the same way. Some are easier to rattle, some of those on every guitar are easier to rattle than others. As part of learning about the guitar is learning what notes like to rattle a little sooner than others as you put more volume into them. All right, so another thing we're working on besides the security of the fretting hand is making sure that both hands are connected together. Now the big test for that is if you can hear the notes essentially be as close to each other as possible. And here's what that would sound like. Listen again. And one more time. You can hear hardly any space in between those notes. Now here's the thing, if my left hand hits the string a little slower and then the right hand plays it, you'll hear the sound kind of mute in between like this. You can hear the first finger hitting the string and interrupting it and muting it before the right hand plays it. You want to kind of avoid that. Typically when you practice these exercises, you want a very connected sound. You want very legato sounds, very connected. On the next string. Now, once you've exhausted that, that's just one pattern. That could be like 0, 1. We could try 0, 2, and that would be like open to the second fret with the second finger. Now, likewise, we could move on and do the other combinations, open to something, you know. But here's the thing, if we have two, what I've noticed is the difficulty of this increases when you have two fretted notes doing all the work. So maybe the pattern is 1 to 2. things that could go wrong and make a bad sound. The open string is very easy to make sound good. It's like a free note almost if your right hand just really does it right and takes care of it. The open string kind of plays itself, but when you have two fretted notes, the exercise gets a little more difficult. And the other thing that increases the difficulty of the exercise is when you play like the other finger, the smaller fingers, like 3 and 4, third and fourth finger. So you want to work more on the third and the fourth finger, things like that, or 2 and 4, or maybe 1 and 4, reaching the distance. Now, another thing to keep in mind when you work this exercise, other than trying to get the coordination and the smoothness of the notes, not having any gap in between them, but trying to minimize the movement in the left hand. And this is especially true, not just of the notes that you're playing, but of the ones that you are not. For instance, I'll show you an example of doing this exercise with 2 and 4, but I want you to watch how close my first and third finger manage to stay on the strings, manage to stay close to the strings without touching them. So here's 2 and 4. So notice that first and third finger were still very close to the strings, even though they weren't pressing them down. I mean, because here's the thing, they're prepared. So if I had to press it down, they'd be ready to go. And minimizing that motion is called ergonomics. It's a conservation of motion, and that's a really important quality to like an emerging classical guitar player, okay? So the next exercise is a little different. It's sort of the same, but different. Now in this exercise, we're using those same patterns, the finger crawl, and you can use any of them. Let's start with open to 1 again. But here there's no rest. So it's just like a continuous movement through the neck like this. 3, 4. So now, like, there's no time to like prepare to get to the next string. So I really kind of have to look ahead. And my best advice for that is think about preparing the next note while the one before it is still sounding. You kind of have to be able to trust the note while it's ringing to think about the next event. It's very important. This exercise can be very difficult when you're using 2 fretted notes. So here it is with like 1 and 2. Notice the prepared motions in the left hand. When 1 was playing, 2 got as close as it could get so it could come down quickly. When 2 was playing, 1 got to the new string and prepared to press down. And also when the new note on the new string happens, the old note lifts up at the same time. That way we don't have any overlap of 2 different notes. We want the notes to be as close together as they can get without overlapping. Once they overlap, they start to sound muddy like this. So you don't want that. You want to have 1 note at a time and have the control to really make them connect like a melody, like a voice. You know, your voice can't really sing more than 1 note at once, and you want to create that kind of quality. Here it is with 1 and 3. So my advice in this exercise is just to keep the motion very small, listen to the length of the notes, and you want to practice these at tempos from like 40 beats a minute for starting out, and try to get everything up to like 120. That's a little quick, but with dedicated practice, you'll find that you can get there pretty fast and your technique will improve quickly. So the next exercise that we're going to talk about is an exercise in finger independence. I call this exercise the inside-outside exercise. And I'll show you why I call it that. So if we find this first assortment of notes, we can see we have the 9th fret on the low E string, the 10th fret on the A, the 11th fret on the D, and the 12th fret on the G. Now what we're going to do is find those pitches, and we're going to play them one at a time, and you could roll them with your thumb like that. You could play them one finger per note, so it could be like thumb, index, middle, ring, or you could play them all at the same time. So from this first form, once you get it good and clean, make sure you fret towards the bottom of the note, or the bottom of the fret. And one thing you want to start thinking about too, other than just where you fret the note and having the note prepared, is ask yourself how much pressure you really need to push the string down. We'll examine that in another exercise after this one. But we want to make a secure sound so there's no buzzing or rattling. So just enough weight on the string to not have it buzz. And we're going to let it ring. And then notice if you look at the next measure, you'll see a similar shape, but the second and third fingers have switched strings. So you get that. So practice going from that first measure and switching the positions of the second and third string to the next one. And going back to the first measure and back to the second measure. One thing you want to watch out for while you're working on that is to not bend the strings. Don't let the strings bend when you move the strings around. And also let the fingers that you're not moving stay on the string. This will really help the finger independence of this exercise. Alright, so I call that first movement inside because the inside fingers were moving. Now once we get to the second measure, we can get to the third measure by switching the outside fingers of the first and fourth finger. And you end up with this shape right here. So we came from here and went to there. And then you want to switch the middle two again, another inside. And then if you switch the outside again, you'll be back where you started. So let's work this inside, outside, just slowly. So here's the first one. All right, now switch inside fingers. And now the outside fingers. And now the inside fingers. Then you can scoot everything down one fret, go to the 8th fret and do the same thing. Inside, outside, inside. And you can move on down. Eventually you can do it on the 1st fret where the frets are further apart. And that gets comfortable. You can try it on the middle strings. Or on the top 4 strings. This exercise is very good for finger independence and developing a kind of a feel for angles on the guitar. You'll find this will be very good. I mean, I've seen people work this exercise even before they learn open chords on the guitar, which I think is very interesting. It's a very logical kind of shape, and I've seen people that have taken a lot of time with these first few exercises on the left hand especially, and become very quick technical learners on the instrument. So remember that. Really spend a lot of time on these exercises and you'll get a lot of technique from them. The next exercise is one of the great exercises for building some real coordination in the left hand. And this uses a technique called a hammer-on. So what we're going to do with a hammer-on is, what we're going to do is we're going to put our first finger on the 5th fret on the low E string. We're going to play that note. But instead of just letting that ring, you'll see the slur marking, a little curved line to the next note to B flat on the 6th fret, which will be with the 2nd finger. So what we're going to do is while the 1st finger is ringing that A note, we're going to slam the 2nd finger down on the 6th fret. Like that. And it's going to create a very smooth transition between those two notes because we don't have to articulate it with the right hand again. Notice those first two notes are only plucked one time on the initial note, and the second note, we just slam the 2nd finger. And also make sure that that 1st finger stays down until the 2nd note is heard. And then you lift the finger up and pluck it again. And then the 3rd time. So that first 2 measures would sound like this with a metronome. Here's that 60 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4. The things you want to think about in this exercise is the same stuff. Keep the fingers close to the fretboard and the string. The finger can't do anything out here. Also, make sure that the notes are very even in volume. You want the pluck note and the hammer-on note to be kind of the same volume, which means you may have to play the hammer-on note quite a bit with more force than you think you need to. The other thing that you want to work on is the evenness of the rhythm with the metronome. The other thing is the kind of the timbre, the tone of the 2 notes. That's best with the right hand, playing with a more of a brighter tone. The sound of a hammer-on can be very bright because we're kind of playing on sounding it on a string that is essentially short. So, if you're thinking from this side of the string, I could get a bright sound picking this note right here, just as I could right here. So because that hammer-on is happening that close to a tight part of the string, it's going to get a kind of more brighter sound. So if you match that with the right hand, you can have an even tone color too. That'll help a lot more. So you got even volume, even rhythm, and even tone color. The other thing you want is the even volume. So if you get all those things together on the slur, you'll do great. Let's play it now and just go all the way up and then back down as in the example. Here we go. 1, 2, here's 1 and 2, and the next string. Back down. So all that would be like 1 and 2. You can also do between 1 and 3, 1 and 4. 2 and 3, 2 and 4, or 3 and 4. So the fingering, by the way, on the guitar, if you come from piano, the thumb doesn't count on the left hand. It starts with 1 as the index finger, 2 is the middle, 3 is the ring finger, and 4 is the pinky finger. That's where I'm getting these patterns from, like 1, 3, 1, 4. And the fret number can change, of course. You know, once you get good at the 5th fret, you can move down to the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st, and get them better because they're longer. Or if maybe 5th fret is too difficult for you, you can scoot down to the 7th fret or even the 9th fret and try to practice the slurs down there and kind of build up your reach and coordination as you get better, a little higher and higher up the fretboard, or lower in this case, as the fret gets further apart. Now let's talk about another type of slur, on the guitar that goes down instead of up. This one is called a pull off. So what you want to do here is this first one goes from the 6th fret to the 5th fret with 2 to 1 on this pull off. So notice I've got the 2nd finger with the 1st finger down below it. And the 1st finger right now is actually already putting some weight on the string, because what I'm going to do with the 2nd finger is essentially do a rest stroke towards the A string, but just with the 2nd finger, because the first one's already pushed down, and then the plucking of the 2nd finger of the 1st finger is actually a real pull off, and that's what you want. And it's really easy to use that next string kind of as a target. It'll help get a big volume out of the pull off. Let's do 2 to 1 on this first exercise. Here we are. 1, 2, 3, and. So that's the pull off. Now remember, instead of just using 2 to 1, you can also try 3 to 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 1, 4 to 2, or 4 to 3 is especially hard. And the way you want to treat these different combinations of fingers on these hammer-ons and pull-offs is 1 and 2 and 1 and 3 are typically going to be really strong. Like all the ones that come to and from the 1st finger typically are easier. The ones that go between like 2 and 4 and 3 and 4, those are the ones you want to work like 3 or 4 times as much on, that make them just as dependable and secure feeling as the hammer-on and pull-offs that have the 1st finger in them. Sometimes we use our 1st finger too much, and it's just the strongest thing. But in guitar, we want every finger to have this kind of equal feeling as we move across the fretboard. So all the fingers are kind of free to play technically as the other fingers. You don't want to have a weak finger, or it'll make it very hard to have an even, strong sound all the time. Okay, and that is pretty much it for the left hand. There's one more little thing I want to show you though. If you found like, let's do this on a F. Find a 6th fret F on the B string. So the 2nd string, open 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What I want to do is I'm going to pluck the note with our finger just barely touching the string over the fret. And I want to gently put pressure as we continue to pluck it until we hear the F kind of sound out when the string starts to begin to touch the fret. See how it buzzes? It has enough pressure. As we continue to put a little more pressure on it, the buzz will go away. And finding that amount of pressure at whatever volume you're going to play, the minimal pressure, is the point of this exercise. The idea is you're going to find that it probably takes a lot less pressure to push the string down to the fret than you originally thought. And you're going to want to try that with your 1st finger, your 2nd finger. Your 3rd finger. And the 4th finger. Exercise to try is once you find that weight that it takes to push the string down with minimal effort, move away from the fret that way towards the nut, and you'll hear the string start to buzz immediately. I haven't changed the pressure, just the place I'm pushing the string down, if you notice. That's how important getting the string fretted close to the metal fret is. Now you don't want to go too far over the metal fret or you get a muted sound like this. So if you ever hear that sound, you know you've gone too far. You need to scoot back. If you hear a buzzing sound though, you want to get as close as you can to the fret basically without crossing over, which is tough to do. You get right on the edge. I mean, it looks like my finger right now is actually crossing over the fret, but really it's not. So you can always err on the side of caution and get a little closer, I think, to the fret at first off than you think you even need. So practice these left-hand exercises a lot. You'll be amazed how many combinations you can get through even in a 30 or 40 minute little practice session, especially if you work diligently with a metronome. Remember, start slow at 40 beats a minute if that's all you can do, and try to work all these exercises up to like 120 beats a minute. And you'll find that you could probably do it in 3 or 4 weeks if you're dedicated to practicing and working really hard on it.